Hello, BookTube. Well, didn't you make yourselves heard, my little army of the undead? Didn't you speak with only one sepulchral voice yesterday, merely as what I thought was an adjunct to Randy Ray's Lone Star Book Club, which is reading Dracula this month for spooky season? As an adjunct of that, I thought we would read chapter 1 of Bram Stoker's Dracula and see what we make of it, trying to imagine that we had nothing to go on, that we were encountering it in a bookstore for the first time, without any movies, without any TV, without anything like that. No children's classics, no comic books, no nothing. And we read it in this edition, this new, lovely new Penguin. What is this called? Penguin Speculative Fiction Special. For October, they brought out, I believe they're inaugurating this line. They brought out 3 vampire volumes in speculative fiction specials, and this is their Dracula. And I thought nothing more of it. I have done a buddy read of Dracula a couple of times on this channel, and I actually participated in reading Dracula aloud with Micah Cummins and Mark at Book Time with Elvis years ago. But no, no. You all wrote to me in emails, comments under that video, Voxer messages saying, you got to keep going. You got to read more than just this one chapter. I might point out we're already doing a read aloud on this channel. So I don't think I have any plans on reading all of Dracula out loud. But we might as well do another chapter. Right, because they're so good. Jonathan Harker has just been dropped off at Castle Dracula. And we are right there as he's experiencing it because we're reading his journal, which he's keeping on his knee as things go on. But so far, that's it. His mysterious driver dropped him off and has left him completely alone. There's a giant courtyard for Castle Dracula, but it's nighttime, there are no lights anywhere, and there's no one around. So let's do chapter 2, which is still Jonathan Harker's journal. Still getting things solely from his point of view, and we don't know that much about him. We know he has a job, a mission, in Transylvania on behalf of a Transylvanian nobleman named Count Dracula. But we don't really know much else than that. So this is chapter 2, but don't get used to it. The date is the 5th of May. I must have been asleep, for certainly if I had been fully awake, I must have noticed the approach to such a remarkable place. In the gloom, the courtyard looked of considerable size, and as several dark ways led from under it under great round arches, it perhaps seemed bigger than it really is. I have not been able to see it by daylight. When the caleche stopped, the driver jumped down and held out his hand to assist me to alight. Again, I could not but notice his prodigious strength. His hand actually seemed like a steel vice that could have crushed mine if he had chosen. Then he took out my traps and placed them on the ground beside me as I stood close to the great door, old and studded with large iron nails and set in a projecting doorway of massive stone. I could see even in the dim light that the stone was massively carved, but that the carving had been much worn by time and weather. As I stood, the driver jumped again into his seat and shook his reins, and the horses started forward, and the trap and all disappeared down one of the dark openings. So the driver doesn't go back, out. He goes down one of the openings that are branching off the courtyard. I stood in silence where I was, for I did not know what to do. And, well, he shouldn't. There's no light. There's no people. There's no nobody. Of bell or knocker there was no sign. Through these frowning walls and dark window openings it is not likely that my voice could penetrate. The time I waited seemed endless, and I felt doubts and fears crowding upon me. What sort of place had I come to, and among what kind of people? What sort of grim adventure was it on which I had embarked? Was this a customary incident in the life of a solicitor's clerk sent out to explain the purchase of a London estate to a foreigner? There we go. Okay. So Jonathan Harker is a solicitor's clerk who has been sent by his firm to Transylvania to finalize the details of a land purchase in England on behalf of this Transylvanian nobleman. Okay. Now we know who he is. Solicitor's clerk. Actually, he's going to amend what he's just said. Mina would not like that. Solicitor. For just before leaving London, I got word that my examination was successful. I am now a full-blown solicitor. I began to rub my eyes and pinch myself to see if I were awake. It all seemed like a horrible nightmare to me, and I expected that I should suddenly awake and find myself at home, with the dawn struggling in through the windows, as I had now and again felt in the morning after a day of overwork. But my flesh answered the pinching test, and my eyes were not to be deceived. I was indeed awake and among the Carpathians. All I could do now was be patient and wait for the coming of morning. Just as I had come into this conclusion, I heard a heavy step approaching behind the great door, and saw through the chinks the gleam of a coming light. Then there was the sound of rattling chains and the clanking of a massive bolts drawn back. A key was turned with the loud grating noise of long disuse, and the great door swung back. Within stood a tall old man, clean-shaven, save for a long white mustache, and clad in black from head to toe, without a single speck of color about him anywhere. He held in his hand an antique silver lamp in which the flame burned without chimney or globe of any kind, throwing long quivering shadows as it flickered in the draught of the open door. The old man motioned me in his right hand with a courtly gesture, saying in excellent English, but with a strange intonation, "Welcome to my house. Enter freely of your own—" Oh, sorry. "Welcome to my house. Enter freely of your own will." He made no motion of stepping to meet me, but stood like a statue, as though his gesture of welcome had fixed him into stone. He doesn't cross the threshold himself. He waits for his invitation to be accepted. The instant, however, that I had stepped over the threshold, he moved impulsively forward, and holding out his hand, grasped mine with a strength which made me wince, an effect which was not lessened by the fact that it seemed as cold as ice, more like the hand of a dead than a living man. Again he said, "Welcome to my house. Come freely, go safely, and leave something of the happiness you bring." The strength of the handshake was so much akin to that which I had noticed in the driver, whose face I had not seen, that for a moment I doubted if it were not the same person to whom I was speaking. So, to make sure, I said interrogatively, "Count Dracula?" He bowed in a courtly way as he replied, "I am Dracula, and I bid you welcome, Mr. Harker, to my house. Come in. The night air is chill, and you must need to eat and rest." As he was speaking, he put the lamp on a bracket on the wall, and, stepping out, took my luggage. He had carried it before I could forestall him. I protested, but he insisted. "Nay, sir, you are my guest. It is late, and my people are not available." Is there anybody in Castle Dracula at all? Let me see to your comfort myself." He insisted on carrying my traps along the passage, and then up a great winding stair, and along another great passage, and on whose stone floor our steps rang heavily. At the end of this he threw open a heavy door, and I rejoiced to see within a well-lit room in which a table was spread for supper, and on whose mighty hearth a great fire of logs flamed and flared. The Count halted, putting down my bags, closed the door, and crossing the room opened another door, which led into a small octagonal room by the light of a single lamp, and seemingly without a door, and motioned me to enter. It was seemingly without a window of any sort. Passing through this, we opened another door, and he opened another door and motioned me to enter. It was a welcome sight, for here was a great bedroom, well lighted and warmed with another log fire, which sent a hollow roar up the wide chimney. So, Castle Dracula, the whole ride here was horrifying, and the castle itself looks extremely unwelcome, considering that it's freezing cold and snowing. But it turns out there are warm rooms. The Count himself left my luggage inside and withdrew, saying before he closed the door, "You will need, after your journey, to refresh yourself by making your toilette. I trust you will find all you wish. When you are ready to come into the other room, there you will find a supper prepared." The light and warmth of the Count's courteous welcome seemed to have dissipated all my doubts and fears. Having then reached my normal state, I discovered that I was half famished with hunger. You can't be famished with anything else, Bram. So making a hasty toilette, I went into the other room. I found supper laid out ready. My host, who stood on one side of the great fireplace, leaning against the stonework, made a graceful wave of his hand to the table, and said, "I pray you be seated and sup, you please. You will, I trust, excuse me that I do not join you, but I have dined already, and I do not sup." I handed to him the sealed letter which Mr. Hawkins had entrusted to me. He opened it and read it gravely. Who is Mr. Hawkins? We'll find out. Then, with a charming smile, he handed it to me to read. One passage of it at least gave me a thrill of pleasure, and then we get that passage, quote, I must regret that an attack of gout, from which malady I am a constant sufferer, forbids absolutely any traveling on my part for some time to come. But I'm happy to say I can send sufficient substitute, one in whom I have every possible confidence. He is a young man, full of energy and talent in his own way, and of a very faithful disposition. He is discreet and silent, and has grown into manhood in my service. He shall be ready to attend on you when you will during his stay, and shall take your instructions in all matters. The Count himself came forward and took off the cover of the dish, and I fell at once on an excellent roast chicken. This, with some cheese and a salad and a bottle of eau tokay, of which I had 2 glasses, was my supper. During the time I was eating it, the Count asked me many questions as to my journey, and I told him by degrees all I had experienced. By this time I had finished my supper, and by my host's desire had drawn up a chair by the fire and begun to smoke a cigar, which he offered me, at the same time excusing himself that he did not smoke. I had now an opportunity of observing him, and found him a very marked physiognomy. His face was a strong, very strong, aquiline, with a high bridge of a thin nose, peculiarly arched nostrils, with lofty domed forehead, and hair growing scantily round the temples, but profusely elsewhere. His eyebrows were very massive, almost meeting over the nose, and with bushy hair that seemed to curl in its own profusion. The mouth, so far as I could see it under the heavy mustache, was fixed and rather cruel-looking, with peculiarly sharp white teeth. These protruded over the lips, whose remarkable ruddiness showed astonishing vitality in a man of his years. For the rest, his ears were pale and at the tops extremely pointed, the chin was broad and strong, and the cheeks firm, though thin. The general effect was of extraordinary pallor. Hitherto I had noticed the backs of his hands as they lay on his knees in the firelight, and they had seemed rather white and fine, but seeing them now close to me, I could not but notice that they were rather coarse, broad, with squat fingers. Strange to say, there were hairs in the center of the palm. The nails were long and fine, and cut to a sharp point. As the Count leaned over me and his hands touched me, I could not repress a shudder. It may have been that his breath was rank, but a horrible feeling of nausea came over me, which, do what I would, I could not conceal. The Count, evidently noticing it, drew back, and with a grim sort of smile, which showed more than he had yet done of his protuberant teeth, sat himself down again on his own side of the fireplace. We were both silent for a while, and as I looked toward the window, I saw the first dim streak of coming dawn. There seemed a strange stillness over everything, but as I listened I heard, as if from down valley, the howling of many wolves. The Count's eyes gleamed, and he said, "Listen to them, the children of the night. What music they make." Seeing, I suppose, some expression in my face strange to him, he added, "Ah, sir, you dwellers in the city cannot enter into the feelings of the hunter." Then he rose and said, "But you must be tired. Your bedroom is all ready, and tomorrow you shall sleep as late as you will. I have to be away till afternoon, so sleep well and dream well." And with a courteous bow, he opened for me himself the door to the octagonal room, and I entered my bedroom. I am all in a sea of wonders. I doubt, I fear, I think strange things which I dare not confess to my own soul. God keep me, if only for the sake of those dear to me. So once again, Jonathan Harker ends the day's journal entry on an incredibly funereal note. He's met his host. His host is a little odd, granted, but his host seems courteous, has given him a warm bedroom, a full fireplace in 2 places, a wonderful meal, wonderful conversation. It has been a warm opening, but he feels foreboding. Then we go to the 7th of May. It is again early morning, but I have rested and enjoyed the last 24 hours. I slept till late in the day and awoke of my own accord. When I dressed myself, I went into the room where we had supped and found a cold breakfast laid out, with coffee kept hot by the pot being placed on the hearth. There was a card on the table, on which was written, "I have to be absent for a while. Do not wait for me. D." So I set to and enjoyed a hearty meal. When I had done, I looked for a bell so that I might let the servants know I had finished, but I could not find one. There are certainly odd deficiencies in the house, considering the extraordinary evidence of wealth which are around me. The table service is of gold, and so beautifully wrought that it must be of immense value. The curtains and upholsteries of the chairs and sofas and the hangings on my bed are of the costliest and most beautiful fabrics, and must have been fabulous value when they were made, for they were centuries old, though in excellent order. I saw something like them at Hampton Court, but there they were worn and frayed and moth-eaten. But still in the room, in none of the rooms is there a mirror. There's not even a toilet glass on my table, and I had to get the little shaving glass from my bag before I could either shave or brush my hair. You can do both without a mirror. But anyway, I have not yet seen a servant anywhere or heard a sound near the castle except the howling of wolves. When I had finished my meal, I didn't know whether to call it breakfast or dinner, for it was between 5 and 6 o'clock when I had it. I looked about for something to read, for I did not like to go about the castle until I'd asked the Count's permission. There was absolutely nothing in the room, book, newspaper, or even writing materials. So I opened another door in the room and found a sort of library. The door opposite mine I tried, but I found it locked. In the library I found to my great delight a vast number of English books, whole shelves of them, and bound volumes of magazines and newspapers. A table in the center was littered with English magazines and newspapers, though none of them were of very recent date. The books were the most varied kind: history, geography, politics, political economy, botany, geology, law, all relating to England and English life and customs and manners. There were even such book references as the London Directory, the Red and Blue Books, Whitaker's Almanac, and the Army and Navy lists, and, it somehow gladdened my heart to see, the Law List. The library of someone who's very interested in England. Very, very interested in England. That's the import of what we're seeing here. We're supposed to be looking over John Anarcha's shoulder and thinking, isn't that odd? Even as a first-time reader, we're supposed to be thinking this is a lot odder than he thinks it is. But I automatically want to know, where did the Count get these things? Who would, in their right mind, would ever bring them to Castle Dracula? Does he go shopping elsewhere for books? Anyway, whilst I was looking at the books, the door opened and the Count entered. He saluted me in a hearty way, and I hoped that I had had a good night's rest. Then he went on. I am glad you found your way here, for I am sure there is much to interest you. These friends, and he laid his hand on some of the books, have been good friends to me for some years past, ever since I had the idea of going to London. They've given me many, many hours of pleasure. Through them, I have come to know your great England, and know her is to love her. I long to go through the crowded streets of your mighty London, to be in the midst of the whirl and rush of humanity, to share its life, its change, its death, and all that makes it what it is. But alas, as yet I know your tongue only through books. To you, my friend, I look to know how to speak. He had an idea that he wanted to go to England. Where did he get that idea? Obviously, the books in the library are the fruit of that idea, not the source of it. So where did he get that idea? But Count, I said, you know and speak English thoroughly. He bowed gravely. I thank you, my friend, but you are all too flattering estimate. But yet I fear that I am but a little way on the road I would travel. True, I know the grammar and the words, yet I know not how to speak them. Indeed, I said, you speak excellently. Not so, he answered. Well, I know that. Did I but move and speak in your London, none there are who would not know me for a stranger. That is not enough for me. Here I am noble, I am boyar. The common people know me, and I am master. But a stranger in a strange land, he is no one. Men know him not, and to know not is to care not. Or is it to fear not, Count? I am content if I am like the rest, so that no man stops if he see me, or pause in his speaking if he hear my words, and say, "Ah, a stranger." I have been so long master that I would be master still, or at least that none other than me should be master of me. You come to me not alone as agent of my friend Peter Hawkins of Exeter. Tell me about my new estate in London. You shall, I trust, rest here with me a while, so that by our talking I may learn English intonation, and would that you would tell me when I make an error, even of the smallest, in my speaking. I am sorry that I had to be away so long today, but you will, I know, forgive one with so many important affairs in hand. Of course, I said I could all I could about being willing, and asked if I might come into that room when I chose. He answered, yes, certainly. but added, "You may go anywhere in the castle, except where the doors are locked, where of course you would not wish to go. There is reason for all things as they are, and did you see with my eyes and know with my knowledge, you would perhaps better understand." I said I was sure of this, and then he went on. "We are in Transylvania, and Transylvania is not England. Our ways are not your ways. And there shall be to you many strange things. Nay, from what you have told me of your experience already, you know something of that strange things here may be." This led to much conversation, and it was evident that as he talked, if only for talking's sake, I asked him many questions regarding things that had already happened to me, or come within my notice. Sometimes he veered off the subject, or turned the conversation by pretending not to understand, but generally he answered all that I asked most frankly. Then, as time went on and I had got somewhat bolder, I asked him of some of the strange things of the preceding night, as, for instance, why the coachman went to places where he had seen the blue flames. Was it indeed true that they showed where gold was hidden? He then explained to me that it was commonly believed that on a certain night of the year, last night, in fact, when all evil spirits are supposed to have unchecked sway, a blue flame is seen over any place where treasure has been concealed. "That treasure has been hidden," he went on, "in the region through which you came last night. There can be but little doubt, for it was the ground fought over for centuries by Wallachians and Saxons and the Turk. Why, there is hardly a foot of soil in all this region that has not been enriched by the blood of men, patriots or invaders. In old days there were stirring times when the Austrian and the Hungarian came up in hordes, and the patriots went out to meet them, men and women, and the aged and the children too, and waited their coming on the rocks above the passes, that they might sweep destruction on them with their artificial avalanches. When the invader was triumphant, he found but little, for whatever there had been was sheltered in friendly soil." "But now," said I, how can it have remained so long undiscovered, when there is sure index of it when men take the trouble to look? In other words, how can there be any treasure left if there's a bright blue flame over it? Everybody would know where it is." The Count smiled, and as his lips ran back over his gums, the long, sharp canine teeth showed out strangely. He answered, "Because your peasant is at heart a coward and a fool. Those flames only appear on one night, and that night no man of this land will, if he can help it, stir without his doors. And, dear sir, even if he did, he would not know what to do. Why, even the peasant that you tell me of who marked the place of flame would not know where to look in daylight for his own work. You would not know, I dare be sworn. You would not be able to find these places again." "There you are right," I said. "I know no more than the dead where even to look for them." Then he drifted into other matters. "Yeah, Jonathan Harker doesn't know anything about dead people. I don't even know where to look for them. I could stumble over a dead person. I wouldn't even know I was in the room with one." "Come," he said at last, "tell me of London and of the house which you procured for me." With an apology for my remissness, I went into my own room and got the papers from my bag. Whilst I was placing them in order, I heard a rattling of china and silver in the next room, and as I passed through, noticed that the table had been cleared and the lamp lit, for it was by this time deep into the dark. So probably Dracula cleared the table himself. The lamps were also lit in the study or library, and I found the Count lying on the sofa reading, of all things in the world, an English Bradshaw's Guide. Why on earth would you read that? That's something that a would-be conqueror would read. When I came in, he cleared the books and papers from the table, and with him I went into the plans and deeds of the figures of all sorts. He was interested in everything, and asked me a myriad of questions about the place and its surroundings. He clearly had studied beforehand all that he could on the subject of the neighborhood, for he evidently at that end knew very much more than I did. When I remarked this, he answered, "Well, my friend, it is not needful that I should. When I go there, I shall be alone, and my friend Harker, Jonathan, nay, pardon me, I've fallen to my country's habit of putting patronymic first. My friend Jonathan Harker will not be by my side to correct and aid me. He will be in Exeter, miles away, probably working at papers of the law with my other friend, Peter Hawkins. Also." We went thoroughly into the business of the purchase of the estate in Purfleet. When I had told him the facts and got his signature on the necessary papers, and had written a letter with them ready to post to Mr. Hawkins, he began to ask me how I had come across so suitable a place. I read to him the notes which I had made at the time, and which I inscribe here. So keep in mind, just as a tiny little thing, how Bram Stoker is keeping this whole narrative very immediate, extremely immediate. All of the things that we're reading here, Jonathan Harker wrote on first blush of memory in his journal. And even now, when he tells us that Count Dracula asked him questions about how he found Carfax Abbey, instead of telling us what he told the Count, we get his own account immediately after he surveyed the property. It's all very, very up to date. So this is a quote from his own memorandum to himself. At Purfleet, on a by-road, I came across just such a place as seemed to be required, and where was displayed a dilapidated notice that the place was for sale. It is surrounded by a high wall of ancient structure built on heavy stones, and has not been repaired for a large number of years. The closed gates were of heavy old oak and iron, all eaten with rust. The estate is called Carfax, no doubt a corruption of the old Quatre Face, as the house is four-sided, agreeing with the cardinal points of the compass. It contains in all some 20 acres, quite surrounded by the solid stone wall above mentioned. There are many trees on it, which make it in places gloomy, and there is a deep, dark-looking pond or small lake, evidently fed by some springs, whereas the water is clear and flows away in a fair-sized stream. The house is very large and of all periods, back, I should say, to medieval times. For one part, the stone is immensely thick, with only a few windows high up and heavily barred with iron. It looks like part of a keep, and is close to an old chapel or church. I could not enter it, as I had not the key for the door leading to it from the house, but I have taken with my Kodak views of it from various points. The house has been added to in a very straggling way, and I can only guess at the amount of ground it covers, which must be very great. There are but few houses close at hand, one being a very large house only recently added to and formed into a private lunatic asylum. It is not, however, visible from the grounds. When I had finished, the Count said, I am glad that it is old and big. I myself of an old family, and to live in a new house would kill me. Especially if there were garlic and crosses involved. A house cannot be made habitable in a day, and after all, a few days go in to make up a century. I rejoice also that there is a chapel of old times. We Transylvanian nobles love not to think that our bones may be amongst common dead. I seek no gaiety nor mirth, nor the bright voluptuousness of much sunshine and sparkling waters which please the young and gay. I am no longer young, and my heart, through weary years of mourning over the dead, is not attuned to mirth. Moreover, the walls of my castle are broken, the shadows are many, and the wind breathes cold through the broken battlements and casements. I love the shade and shadow, and would be alone with my thoughts when I may. Seemed plenty alone. Somehow, his words and his look did not seem to accord, or else it was that he cast his face made his smile look malignant and saturnine. Presently, with an excuse, he left me, after asking me to pull all my papers together. He was some little time away, and I began to look at some of the books around me. One was an atlas, which I found open naturally to England, as if that map had been much used. On looking at it, I found in certain places little rings marked, and on examining these I noticed that one was near London on the east side, manifestly where his new estate was situated. The other two were Exeter and Whitby on the Yorkshire coast. It was at the better part of an hour when the Count returned. Aha, he said, still at your books. Good, but you must not work always. Come, I am informed your supper is ready. He took my arm, and we went into the next room, where I found an excellent supper ready on the table. The Count again excused himself, as he had dined out on his being away from home. But he sat, as the previous night, and chatted whilst I ate. After supper I smoked, as on the last evening, and the Count stayed with me, chatting and asking questions on every conceivable subject, hour after hour. I felt that it was getting very late indeed, but I did not say anything, for I felt under the obligation to meet my host's wishes in every way. I was not sleepy, as the long sleep yesterday had fortified me, but I could not help experiencing that chill which comes over one at the coming of the dawn, which is like, in its way, the turn of the tide. They say that people who are near death die generally at the change to the dawn or at the turn of the tide, anyone who has then tried and tied, as it were, to his post, experiences this change in the atmosphere, can well believe it. All at once we hear the crow of a cock coming up the preternatural shrillness through the clear morning air. Count Dracula, jumping to his feet, said, "Why, there is the morning again. How remiss I am to let you stay up so long. You must make your conversation regarding my dear new country, England, less interesting, so that I may not forget how time flies by us." And with a courtly bow, he left me. No hesitation. I went into my own room and drew the curtains, but there was little to notice. My window opened into the courtyard. All I could see was the warm gray of quickening sky. So I pulled the curtains again, and have written of this day. So that's his journal entry for that day. Then we move on to the 8th of May. I began to fear, as I wrote in this book, that I was getting too diffuse, but now I am glad that I went into detail from the first, for there is something so strange about this place and all in it that I cannot but feel uneasy. I wish I were safe out of it, or that I had never come. We have not seen anything so far. He's going to relate what is on his mind here, because he's like journal keepers really do. He's jumping a little bit ahead in his thoughts as he summarizes the day. It may be that this strange night existence is telling on me, but I would that were all. If there were anyone to talk to, I could bear it, but there is no one. I have only the Count to speak with, and I fear I am myself the only living soul within the place. Let me be prosaic so far as facts can be. It will help me to bear up, and the imagination must not run riot with me. If it does, I am lost. Let me say at once how I stand, or seem to. I only slept a few hours when I went to bed, and feeling that I could not sleep any more, got up. I had hung my shaving glass by the window, and was just beginning to shave. Suddenly, I felt a hand on my shoulder, and heard the Count's voice saying to me, "Good morning." I started, for it amazed me that I had not seen him, since the reflection in the glass covered the whole room behind me. In starting, I had cut myself slightly, but I did not notice it at the moment. Having answered the Count's salutation, I turned to the glass again to see how I had been mistaken. This time there could be no error, for the man was close to me, and I could see him over my shoulder, but there was no reflection of him in the mirror. The whole room behind me was displayed, but there was no sign of the man in it except myself. This was startling, and, coming on top of so many strange things, was beginning to increase that vague feeling of uneasiness which I always have when the Count is near. But at the instant I saw that the cut had bled a little, and the blood was trickling over my chin. I laid down the razor, turning as I did so half round to look for some sticking plaster. When the Count saw my face, his eyes blazed with a sort of demonic fury, and he suddenly made a grab at my throat. I drew away, and his hand touched the string of beads which had held the crucifix. It made an instant change in him, for the fury passed so quickly that I could hardly believe it was ever there. "Take care," he said. "Take care how you cut yourself. It is more dangerous than you think in this country." Is the Count referring to sepsis? Tetanus? Or that he will kill you if he sees your blood and drink you dry? Then, seizing the shaving glass, he went on. "And this is the wretched thing which has been done the mischief. It is a foul bauble of man's vanity. Away with it!" And opening the heavy window with one wrench of his terrible hand, he flung out the glass, which was shattered into 1,000 pieces on the stones of the courtyard far below. Then he withdrew without a word. It is very annoying, for I do not see how I am to shave unless my watch case on the bottom of my shaving pot, which is fortunately made of metal. And at that point, when Jonathan Harker is thinking, how am I going to shave now, that we can comfortably assume he's a moron. When I went into the dining room, breakfast was prepared, but I could not find the Count anywhere, so I breakfasted alone. It is strange that as yet I have not seen the Count eat or drink. He must be a very peculiar man. Darling, you haven't seen him during the daytime either. After breakfast, I did a little exploring in the castle. I went on the stairs and round a room looking towards the south. The view was magnificent, and from where I stood there was every opportunity of seeing it. The castle is on the very edge of a terrible precipice. A stone falling from that window would fall 1,000 feet without touching anything. As far as the eye can reach is a sea of green treetops, with occasionally a deep rift where there is a chasm. Here and there are silver threads where the rivers wind in deep gorges through the forest. But I am not in heart to describe beauty, for when I had seen the view I explored further. Doors, doors, doors everywhere, and all locked and bolted. In no place, save for the windows in the castle wall, is there an available exit. The castle is a veritable prison, and I am a prisoner. And that's how chapter 2 ends. Where suddenly the details of why Jonathan Harker is visiting this man, which we have not had, we now suddenly have them. We have them side by side with so many creepy details that it's engrossing. Absolutely engrossing. Now, I said yesterday that you should try and put yourself in mind of encountering all of this for the very first time in a Victorian bookshop without any of the cultural inheritance that Dracula has become for us. But that wouldn't mean necessarily that you'd be going in alone. If you're a bookish person, and if you're shopping for the latest thing in a bookstore, you might be. If you're a bookish person, and maybe you'll read anything, and maybe you like cheap books, it's possible that you've read Varney the Vampire already. It's possible that some of this stuff, the mirror, the hair, and the palm, might be tipping you off to quite a bit. But if not, and we have to assume the majority of the people picking this book up not, what are you thinking now? What on earth are you thinking now? So that is chapter 2 of Dracula. So I will wrap this up for now, and I will see you soon. Thank you, my children of the night.